So I'm an Australian leading teacher and currently an acting principal who has been responsible for student wellbeing in rural Victoria, and so I've spent the last 18 months researching and learning about growth mindset and positive psychology and mindfulness. So my search led me to you, and I'm still being inspired by what you do, and thanks for blabbing with me, Trev. It's fantastic. I still love seeing what you put out.
I'm just like you, doing the same thing. I think it's a fascinating topic, and then there's a ton of applications, and then a ton of, I guess, what I like to do is look into how you teach it, like taking the principles, taking the science, like, and then how can we share it the best? Like, what's the best way to go about teaching it and creating a culture around it? And so I think you and I are similar in that journey, and that's sort of a never-ending thing. You can always get better at understanding it and sharing it. So
Agreed. Little things pop up and you start making connections and you think, yes, that works, maybe we need to do this. Yeah, continue. It never ends. So I was thinking, look, Carol Dweck, and everyone knows she's a psychologist who's done the famous study on growth and fixed mindset. She's recently started talking about her concerns that educators are teaching their students to have a growth mindset, and they've become very good at saying good effort. And it's almost like a replacement of saying well done or good work that you probably used to say. And it's okay because I'm saying this about the effort, but and I think she's worried that it's losing its impact on students. And she said that growth mindset has become disconnected from learning and progress. And I think that's why I wanted to talk about this today. So building a growth mindset in your classroom should be a priority for every teacher, of students of any age, doesn't matter what age they are. And to bring out the best learning opportunities for their students, they need to combine the growth mindset, but also combine it with the process feedback and the goal setting, I think. Encourage the high standards in your classroom. And so growth mindset isn't just sticking a poster up on the wall, and it's not just saying good effort all the time, because I see that sometimes. So I was thinking, what do you think? And, we've got Australia, all students coming back. They've either come back just in the last day or so, or they're coming back in a couple of days from their holidays. So it's a new year. We've got teachers with new classes. And I'm thinking, from day one, what would your hot tips be for the teachers to connect the growth mindset with the feedback and with the goal setting? And I thought you'd be perfect to ask.
I'm glad that you reached out, because this, like I said, is what I'm fascinated with. Like, how do we implement? And I could not agree more with Carol Dweck as far as maybe the misconceptions or where people are missing the boat. I feel like a big problem is people not understanding exactly what a growth mindset is, and like you said, putting a poster on the wall or just talking about effort. And the other big hurdle, or the big, I guess, misstep in this is, especially when I go work with different teachers and coaches, they're really good at getting excited about growth mindset and telling their kids and their players, look, you need to have a growth mindset. But what's happening is the teacher, the leader, the coach doesn't implement a growth mindset within themselves. And so there's a big gap there. Like, if the teacher doesn't have a growth mindset herself or himself, it's hard to create a solid culture around that, around those principles. And so I've been extremely fortunate, because what I've been doing for about the past year is traveling around and teaching this to different groups, young students, college athletes. I've done a few corporate trainings, and so I've got a ton of reps and a ton of practice at teaching this. And where I'm at now is, the way I see it, there are just a few steps that you really need to focus on to implement this. And then of course, there's ways to innovate and improve these steps. But the way I see it is, first you need to lay down the foundation and talk about what a growth mindset actually is and what a fixed mindset actually is. Step number 2, and we'll dive into all of these, but step number 2 is you have to live it yourself. You have to be about it yourself and implement it into your life. not only in the classroom and not only in sports, but in your life. This is an important thing that can help you across the board. After you're living it, now we can start to teach it to the students, and now we can start to build a culture around it. And through my work and my research, I've narrowed it down to like the two main things you need to do to develop a growth mindset culture. And these two things are based off of what a growth mindset is. And so the way I see it, the two things you have to nail in your classroom are the culture of believing in our ability to learn, so beliefs towards learning, and then the culture of what are we about? Like, what do we value the most? Do we value performance or do we value growth? And so these beliefs towards learning and our value system, I think, are what really determine if our classroom or culture is essentially a growth mindset culture or if we're missing the boat a bit. So to really have a growth mindset culture, we have to do both. Now, the opposite side would be a fixed mindset culture where we don't believe in our ability to learn and grow, or we don't think that we have to. And second, we value performance, aka looking good, over growth. And so with these two things, we've created sort of a grid that can guide our thinking as far as how to implement growth mindset. Now, this grid and these ideas, that also dictates the way we give feedback, the way we praise, the way we plan lessons, the way we reward students. Like it's all sort of a byproduct of understanding what the mindsets are. And then we just make sure that everything we do in the classroom is in line with those mindsets. And so if we lay it out in a grid like this, I think it's a solid way to do two things. One, help students recognize like where they are at as far as growth or fixed mindset. But two, you can hold yourself accountable to see, wait, I just said this to the student. What does that really mean? Like, where is this putting the student on the spectrum? And I think it's a great way to sort of guide our feedback. And what we'll find as we dive into this is it's way more than just effort. It's way more than just saying growth mindset means you just work hard all the time or just praising effort all the time. There's a little bit more to the picture, and it's bigger than just effort. And so, again, through our travels, like, this is what I've discovered, and of course there's going to be ways to improve this. This is different than what I was doing just 8 months ago. So we're always learning more. But as for right now, I've found that this process is very effective at teaching it. What is a growth mindset? The whole core of the mindsets starts with your beliefs towards learning. Growth mindset is essentially a belief in your ability to learn and grow. A belief that skills and intelligence come from work. They come from, or those are things that can be grown. Fixed mindset is the opposite of that, is the belief that skills and intelligence are set. Now, a big misconception here, or something that people don't usually talk about, is sometimes people believe, or sometimes the most skilled people can have a fixed mindset because they believe that those skills were natural, right? And so a fixed mindset is either believing that they don't have to learn, so they believe that these skills and their abilities are just given to them naturally, so they're like, oh, I don't need to work, I don't need to grow, I don't need to try new things. Or it's the belief that you can't. It's the belief that I'm just not a math person, like I just don't have this in me. So a fixed mindset is the belief that you can't learn or you don't have to. Growth mindset is the belief that I can learn and I should learn. The second major defining characteristic is sort of like what you value or what are you about in any given situation. This could be group value of like what is our classroom about, or it could be individually based, like what is your main focus? And through her research, Dweck has discovered that like the main focus of somebody with growth mindset in any situation they're in is learning and growing. Now this could be taking a test, it could be a project, presenting, it could be singing in the choir. Like they're concerned with getting better, and people with a fixed mindset are concerned with how they look to others, or like validating themselves, or being judged, or seeming smart. So it's sort of a performance focus versus the process of growth focus. And if you look at like the growth mindset tables that you see all over the internet, like it goes on to show like 6 more characteristics. But what we've discovered, and I think we're onto something, is that all of those other characteristics are byproducts of those top two. So if we really hone in and talk about the top two, the rest sort of take care of itself. So what we have now is we're starting to define what the two mindsets are. A growth mindset is a belief in your ability to learn and grow, and you're able to make that priority number one. A fixed mindset is not believing in your ability to learn and grow, and your number one priority is how you look, which can cause a lot of interesting things to happen. And like that's where Dweck's research comes into play, where you see how this can impact your long-term ability to learn, how this impacts the way you perform under pressure across the board. Getting into that fixed mindset can be destructive. So now that we understand what it is, we need to live it ourselves. To live it ourselves, that means we need to believe in our ability to learn and grow, and we need to believe in our students' ability to learn and grow. And so what happens is if you can live it yourself, you're headed down the right direction for creating the culture, because what you're saying to the students is, look, this is important, and this is something I'm doing with you. Like, we are together in this journey. We are on the same team. And the bottom line is, I'm going to put you in situations where you're going to make mistakes and where you're going to struggle and where you're going to be challenged, but I am going to be there with you, and I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm going to struggle, and I'm going to fail as well, because that's how growth happens. That's how learning happens. And here in this classroom or in this family, we value growth more than we value looking good. And so therefore, I'm not always going to look good, and that's good. I'm going to be there in the trenches with you. This is a team effort, side by side. I understand how learning works, and I'm going to help create an environment where it's safe to do that. And I think that is the key. This is, Karch Karai says this a lot, where he goes, it is our job as leaders, as coaches, as teachers, to create an environment where it's safe to learn. Because the truth is, that's what we're in the business of doing. We're in the business of helping people learn. Therefore, we need to create an environment that's in line with the rules of learning. Like, if we're saying we want to help students learn, yet we punish mistakes and make them feel embarrassed or ashamed of mistakes, like, that's not in line with how people learn. We're going to say box number one is the first box, and that is the I can't learn / I value how I look more than anything else. What mindset do you think that is?
Well, it's fixed.
Very, very fixed. Like, box one is where you just do not want to go. So here's the thing. We can put people into box one by telling them things like, maybe you're just not good at math, or maybe you're not a dancer, or maybe you're just not a shooter. And then we create a culture in the classroom that punishes mistakes and rewards performance. So do you see how both of those things would put students in that box, where it's saying, we value you when you look good and perform well. That's making number one priority how you look. Yes. Or we're talking about things that go against this belief in your ability to learn. We're labeling students, you are this, you aren't this. Even telling a student that you're so brilliant, you're just a natural. That can put them in box one. That's telling them that you don't have to learn.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and their peers are also picking up on that. Like, their peers are, and so they become labelled with everybody, not just you, and not just with themselves, but everyone will start to label them the same way.
Right. And as soon as you're labelled, it squashes the learning. They have trouble then. And the labeling, the reason that matters is as soon as somebody thinks that their skills were given to them, of course they're going to adopt this dangerous belief of, oh, I don't need to work for it. It's natural in me. I'm just naturally good at this. And when you believe that, you're not going to put in the work. You're not going to show the grit and the determination to learn new stuff because you don't think you have to. And so it's such a dangerous thing to label a student. And then the opposite is true. If we're telling them, hey, maybe you're just not cut out to be good at math. Number one, that is so false. There is no research that backs that up. But number two, the students start to believe like, we're doing math again. I can't do that. I'm just not a math person. Okay, so like, do you see how this can start to guide, number one, our feedback, but number two, like maybe how we would structure a lesson? Is this lesson putting the value on performance, or talk about putting the value on effort and the process. 3 says, hey, we value getting better more than how we look, but we still don't believe in our ability to grow. So it's like, these are the students who are like, you know what, I don't really care how I look. Like, I'm down to make mistakes and stuff, but they still don't believe in their ability to learn stuff. And if you don't have that belief, it's so hard to learn. So like, let's talk about belief. Belief, I think, is like huge. Think about like our parents or our grandparents. And when they see one of these, what do they say? I could never learn. Like, they're just like, what in the world? I could never learn how to do this, right? So what belief do they have about their ability to learn how to use a phone?
No, they've just had I can't learn. I'm too old for it. I can't do that.
And then what happens is, because they don't believe that they can do it, they never try. They never even try it. But reality is, if they spent 15 or 20 minutes just bopping around on here, making some mistakes, figuring it out, they could figure it out. Because the truth is, there's no such thing as an iPhone gene, right? It's not like they're missing some gene. It's like, yep, you can't learn how to use this. Everyone can learn how to use this.
Yep.
You just have to do it. But do you see how many times we cut ourselves off with our beliefs or stories we tell us about learning? Same thing happens with math. Same thing happens with dancing. Oh, I'm just not a dancer. And then you never go try to dance. Or same with, I think math might be the best example, where people are just like, I'm just not a math person. But then they never put themselves in a situation where they're ever going to get any reps or experience to get good at math. And so even if we can create the right values where it's like, hey, I don't care what people think, I'm just about like learning and growing. But if you don't believe in your ability to do that, you're still not going to get there. You're still going to have trouble developing. Box 4, you believe in your ability to learn. Okay, so we're on the right side of this, but we're so worried about how we look that we avoid any situation where real learning can happen. So box 4 says, yo, I believe I can learn and develop at things, but my number one priority when I'm in a situation is how I'm looking to others. That's going to hold you back from learning. And again, if we go back to dancing, I think that's why most of us can't dance. That's why I can't dance. I believe in growth mindset. I know that I have 2 feet. I have all the tools you need to dance. But I'm so worried about how I look that I never give myself the chance to get good at it. So even though I believe I can do it, I never do it because I don't want to look bad to others. And so do you see how this box is dangerous as well? Because we know, all of us know, if you read anything about learning and development, everyone says you have to struggle, you have to make errors, you have to make mistakes, you have to kind of look bad before you get good. And these students have so much trouble learning because if their number one concern or main focus is how they look, they're never going to go through the struggle and make the mistakes and go through the ugliness that's involved with learning. So do you see how that box, even though they believe they can learn, they still miss the boat because they're so concerned with perception.
Yeah.
And so what that does is it shows like that mindset isn't just about believing you can learn, but it's also about like valuing that and understanding. And I think this is key. You have to understand how learning works. You have to understand that learning is not pretty and learning is not easy. Learning is ugly. Learning has all struggle and mistakes and errors, but that's a good thing, right? So we have to create a value system in our classroom that says, hey, we understand how learning works and we want you to make mistakes. It's good to make mistakes. Like, we want you to stretch and we want you to struggle. We're never going to punish you for that. In fact, we're going to high five you for that because that's where the magic happens. And so this is where I see teachers missing the boat, where they say, hey, we want to have a growth mindset in our classroom. We believe in your ability to learn and grow. But what do? They punish mistakes, they reward performance, and they put people into box 4. Yes. And I think this grid is a great way to hold yourself accountable. Like, again, how you give feedback, but also like how you structure the classroom. I think It's a great guide. If we really want to help someone believe in their ability to learn, which is like step one, right? On the grid, very important on the grid. Step one of growth mindset is to believe in your ability to learn. If you're going to do that, you need to have some conversations about how this thing works.
Yes.
About how the brain works. And obviously you could go way deep into the science, like neuroscience. You could get very, very like deep into it and talk for months about it. But what we found is simplifying it down and telling it in a way that makes sense to people is just as helpful. So a couple of ways that we go about teaching people how their brain learns. First, we tell them almost all of the neuroscience. Like there's decades of science that shows that your brain is essentially a learning machine. Like your brain is literally built to just learn and get good at things and learn and get good at the things you do the most. Like it's there. And of course there are some head starts or whatever, but everybody's brain, if you have one of these, you have the tools to get really, really good at anything, period, anything. You just have to understand how it works. So let's talk about how it works. One story we tell. Your brain is like a muscle. And people understand how muscles work, right? So if I'm in the weight room and I'm doing curls, and I'm doing 10 curls, which I do all the time. I'm doing 10 curls. Which rep out of the 10 is the hardest?
The last one.
The
Isn't
10th
it?
rep.
Yeah.
And that's, the 10th rep, I start shaking, I make faces, I turn purple, there's struggle.
Do that in about a second.
Which rep out of the 10 is the most important to develop like muscles and strength?
The last one, the one that hurt.
Right. And so they're all important, but the 10th one where you're like failing and struggling and stretching, like that's where muscles come from. What people need to know is your brain is the same. Your brain learns best when you stretch it and challenge it and get a little outside of your comfort zone, just like a muscle. Like when you get it there, that's when it really learns, and that's when it really picks up on things and it learns to adapt. And so our job is to find that zone, like find that way to stretch ourselves and do hard things and find ways to get out of our comfort zone. Like that's where the development happens. So talking to students and talking to them about, hey, like, you know how muscles work, and they've been taught that since like third grade PE. But tying that to their brain and saying, look, your brain's just like a muscle. And if you want your brain to learn and grow, you need to stretch it. You need to challenge it. And when you do that, of course you're going to make mistakes. And of course, I'm going to get to the point of failure and I'm going to look ugly, but that's how muscles are built, right? So we need to get there with our brain. We need to get there in the classroom. And so that's a great story to tell.
Absolutely.
Another one that we talk about is jungle tiger, zoo tiger. We talk about how the jungle tiger who lives in the wild has a really hard life. Obviously makes a lot of mistakes, and there's struggle, and there's times where she doesn't eat because she essentially has to do everything on her own. She has to find food, find shelter, protect herself, everything. And if you compare that to the life of the zoo tiger has it easy. She just chills in the zoo. People bring her food. She has water. She always has protection, and she hangs out in a cage all day. And then you can ask anyone in the whole world, what would happen if you took a zoo tiger and you put her into the jungle? And everyone in the whole world would say the zoo tiger would die. But the zoo tiger would die because she's never been forced to adapt, right? She's never developed any skill because she's been hanging out in the zoo. What you want to point out is your comfort zone, and every person that you work with has a comfort zone. Your comfort zone is like the cage in the zoo. And people love to chill in their comfort zone. Because when you're in your comfort zone, you look good, it's safe, and it's easy, but you don't get better. Just like the zoo tiger, it's not learning anything. You get better in the jungle. You get better in the wild. You get better when there's like some struggle and some mistakes and some difficulties. And so again, we're showing people how this works. Now to take it back to some brain science, Darwin did a study a long time ago where they looked at the brains of animals that grew up in the zoo and compared them to their like counterparts that lived in the wild. The animals that lived in the wild, their brains were 30% larger than the same exact species that grew up in a zoo. That's showing like when you are out in the wild and you're out struggling and out figuring stuff out, like that is helping your brain learn. Like that is the zone to be in.
That's amazing.
And one more story. We like to talk about animals. You could talk about rats. They did a study where they divided these rats up into 3 groups. And again, they're all rats. They all had the same tools, just like the tigers had the same tools. They both had stripes, they both had teeth, but the way that they developed played a huge impact on their ability to learn and grow. The rat study's the same. 3 groups of rats. One group of rats was put into isolation, where like they're alone in a box, no one's around, and they just chilled there. They had food and water, literally alone, did nothing. Second group got to be social. They put them into mazes with other rats, and there was like toys and things and puzzles and all this stuff. Very stimulating environment. Third group, they were alone, but they got to watch the other rats. They got to watch the rats play. Okay? So we have isolation, social, and watching social, right?
That's mean.
And then, I know. And so after a few months of this, they did what they got to do. They killed the rats, and they looked at their brains. They analyzed their brains. I think obviously anyone would probably come to the conclusion that the rats that didn't do anything, their brains didn't learn much. There weren't many connections. There wasn't much mass to the brain. Social rats had like the most dense brains with the most connections. They were smarter. They were more intelligent across the board. The rats that watched, their brains were exactly like the rats that were alone. There was no benefit to watching. There's no benefit to sitting there and watching this stuff happen. You can apply this to the classroom. Like our brain learns by doing, not by watching, and not by just being alone. We learn by doing. And again, to tie it back to a muscle, your muscles are the same, or your brain's like a muscle. Just like a muscle. It doesn't grow on its own. Like your muscles can't grow by not lifting, and they can't grow by you going to the gym and watching people lift. They grow when you lift, right? Your brain is the same. It doesn't grow when you just do nothing, and it doesn't grow when you just watch people learn or talk about learning. It grows when you get the reps and you experience and you're in the wild and you learn. And so what we found is if you sit and talk about those 3 different examples, and they all take you to the same endpoint of saying, your brain's a learning machine and it can learn anything, and if anybody tells you different, they're wrong. But if you talk about these stories, you can start to paint the picture for a student or an athlete about like, wow, this thing right here is incredible. This thing right here is designed to learn. My job is to get it into the right zone. Is to stretch it, to get to the 10th rep, to get into the wild, to struggle. And when you put it there, it can learn and get better at anything. So do you see how talking about these stories would help cultivate a belief in your ability? Like you're just saying, like, look, you have everything right here. That's the tool. You just have to understand how to use it. You have to understand how to use it. And then to build onto that, where our values come into play, we have to create a culture in our classroom that understands that science, that understands that every student you work with, they have the tools to get really good at anything. Are some better than others? Absolutely. But it's because of something that's happened in their life, something they've experienced, that's made them better. So that's okay. We can talk about those things, but we can also help the students that are trailing or falling behind. They need to understand, like, look, you have the tools. We just need you to get the experience and get the reps. So believe in your ability to learn. Encourage students. Talk to them about this thing. That will do like wonders for creating a growth mindset culture. There's a great book called Brain Rules that I'm like all about right now. And another principle that they talk about in there is your brain doesn't learn boring things. So it's like it's talking about how important it is to create an engaging environment. Like an engaging environment is fun, but it's not fake fun. like a lot of teachers, a lot of coaches do this where they create like fake fun environments where you just do totally pointless activities that are fun, but it's like, okay, that didn't really help. And so the key, and I guess the art to this is, can you create a fun and an engaging environment that matters, that is helping people learn? And again, that's the art. You can, yeah, you could talk about that forever and go into like different ways to do that. But this is all part of creating that culture, a culture that's based on learning. And what culture would you rather be in? Think about this. The more people we can get on board with the growth mindset, like the more people in the group that are on board, the better the culture becomes. Because if I'm a student and I understand that my teacher or professor and my classmates all have a growth mindset, I'm going to be more likely to step out into the wild and more likely to like take risks and make mistakes because I know, look, my teacher knows how learning works and so do my classmates. They're going to support me when I stretch and when I fail because they know, hey, that's how you get better. Yeah. But if I'm in a classroom where I know that maybe some of my students or my classmates have a fixed mindset, or my teacher has a fixed mindset, it's going to be really hard for me. Even if I do have a growth mindset, it's going to be hard for me to step out into the wild and to make those mistakes because I know they're going to look down on me, or they're going to give me poor feedback, or they're going to punish me. And so the important thing here is to create like the 360 culture where it's like teacher, students, we're all here, we're all in this together. Now, obviously that's kind of hard to do, but it's important.
And that's why it's important for the whole staff to be on board with this stuff too. Like consistency. You can imagine how confusing it would be for a student to have one teacher in this part of the day where they do have the growth mindset, and they've got to go to the next teacher, and the next teacher doesn't, and then the next teacher does, and then the next teacher doesn't. The whole school needs to be on board. Everyone needs to be on board.
Yeah, it's really tough. And there's some things we found to help combat that because, like, the truth of the matter is we cannot change everyone. As much as we wish we could, we can't. And so there's some ways to combat that. And if we jump into, like, the feedback stuff, that's kind of where it comes into play.
Yeah.
Where we talk about, like, the different things that you can focus on with feedback. But where I'm at now with that, like, the research on the feedback is solid. Like the videos about whether you want to give feedback on the process or performance, like that research is incredible, it's solid, and it's very clear, like, look, when you're praising or critiquing, when you're giving feedback, you need to be talking about the process, not abilities and outcomes. And when you focus on the process and when you talk about strategies and effort and stuff like that, that can put somebody into a growth mindset. And when you talk about performance and when you talk about outcomes and when you talk about abilities, that can put you into a fixed mindset. But what we're finding, just as important as talking to people about how to give feedback, and you know the importance of how to give feedback, like your case study that you did with the bugs, like I tell everyone about that, it's my favorite thing. But just as important as teaching students how to give peer-to-peer feedback or teaching teachers how to give feedback is teaching people how to receive feedback.
Yes.
How to receive it. Because it's not just about giving it, we also need to understand how to receive it. And what we'll find is when you have a fixed mindset, it's really hard to receive feedback. People with a fixed mindset absolutely deflect and become defensive when they receive feedback. And if you go back to what a fixed mindset is, you see why. They don't think that they can get better. So if they're getting feedback, to them it's pointless. It's like, why are you telling me this stuff? I'm not a math person. I can't get better, right? And so they don't think it can change, so they see feedback as pointless. The other thing is they believe they have a set a set level of abilities. So it's like your level of abilities, that is who you are. And if somebody's giving you feedback, that's a knock on you as a person, like very personal.
It's a threat.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. It's a threat. And then growth mindset is completely the opposite, where because they value learning and getting better, and because they believe they can do it, when they get feedback, they're like, yes, give me that feedback. Like, that's going to help me. Right? And so there's a great blog that talks about, his name is Tim Urban, and he wasn't talking about feedback research or anything like this, but he made it like told a great story, and I'll just put it into our terms. Somebody with a growth mindset is like a scientist. And a scientist knows, yes, I have this like result that I'm trying to get, but the only way to get the result I want to get is to have a really good process. And my process involves like struggling, mistakes. I have to tweak it. I have to experiment. I have to learn. I have to just, everything goes here if I want this result. Are you with me? So like investing in the process to get the result. And so the scientist loves getting feedback because that will help her process. The scientist loves failing because that will help her process. The scientist loves to work hard because that helps her process. Somebody with a fixed mindset, they feel like that they are the experiment. So they feel like they're not the scientist, they're the experiment. They're being judged, they're failing, they're succeeding, and everything becomes personal then. So when you feel like you're the experiment, you feel like you're the center and everyone's looking at you. And when you mess up, it's your fault and you're always being judged and ridiculed. And so what we encourage students to do is live like a scientist. Understand, like, sure, I want to get good grades and I want to win basketball games. But in order to do that, I need to go all in on the process. Like outcomes are a reflection of the process. You can want them, but you have to invest here. Whereas people with a fixed mindset are just obsessing over how they look or the results, but then they never pay attention to what's going to get them better results because they avoid all the stuff in the process. They don't like to work hard. They don't like to take feedback. They don't like to make mistakes. They give up when it gets hard. And so they like just miss out on all the stuff that can help them actually grow. So I like that kind of metaphor of like, live like a scientist. Live like a scientist. You're always trying to gather information and find ways to improve your strategies, and that helps you achieve your goals. Whereas the other side is, you're the experiment. Oh man, like I'm being judged. I can't mess up. I can't fail. The feedback isn't just about saying you work hard. It's about the process. And the process means yes, effort, but yes, strategies. And yes, grit and determination and experimenting and fail. Like all of that is the process.
All that stuff.
That's what we talk about. That's what we talk about. We avoid talking about abilities. You are so smart or you are not good at this. And we avoid just talking about outcomes and saying, you're so smart, you got an A, here's a candy bar, right? Like, so we avoid talking about that. One thing I will add, one update is we like to acknowledge outcomes but then focus on the process. So we can say, hey, you got an A, that's incredible. How did you do that? Or I noticed that you worked really, really hard at this. So we acknowledge what happened here, but we take the focus to like, what did you do that led to that? And then what can we improve even more, right? And the same is true if maybe they got like a C or an F on a test, right? We say, wow, that wasn't your best job on that, or that wasn't your best performance. Let's talk about why. I noticed you missed this type of problem. Let's work on that together. So we acknowledge this. We're living in reality. The reality is there are always outcomes and there's results in anything you ever do. So we need to understand we have to acknowledge those, but then the only way to improve those and fix those is to go here on the process. And so again, it's not just about effort, it's about all of the stuff that goes into the process.
I think too, like showing kids examples of stuff too, like examples of good high standards. So I find that if they don't know what to aim for or what to head for, they're not going to do the best because they've never seen it before. They don't know what you're expecting from them either.
Yeah, modeling. And so that goes how you approach situations and how you approach mistakes. Like, do you own up to the mistakes that you make and say, wow, like, honestly, that lesson didn't go as planned, and ask for feedback from them, right? Like, ask the students, like, hey, the plan for this lesson was to teach this, this, and this. Is that what you got from this? Oh, no? Well, what do you think could be better? Like, that's showing them, that's modeling it. And then I think you can show them examples as well. There's tons of examples of people running with these ideas, whether they know it or not. Like, some people don't know what growth and fixed mindset are, but they kick butt because they're like living by these principles. Last thing I want to tell you, maybe not the last thing, but another thing I'm going to tell you. So we talked about how we can't change everybody. But what we found is that when we teach students and when we understand it ourselves about these types of feedback and how helpful this type of feedback is, you can start to like block out the bad feedback. So like an example is this. I understand how this feedback works. I think I was in Iowa and I was doing a big workshop about feedback with thousands of teachers. I went for like an hour and a half about this stuff. And at the end, one of the teachers comes down and she shakes my hand and she goes, I just want you to know you're such a natural public speaker. That was incredible. And I was just like, oh, no, like that. And let's just rewind a second. Can we see how that is destructive feedback? Because that's telling me you got it made, it's a natural ability that you have, and you don't really need to work at it, right? So what she did is just give me the worst feedback that you can give. Not the worst ever, but it wouldn't be helpful. But because I know how this works, I can start to change it in my head. I can say, okay, it seems like she thought it went well. Okay, so I'll take that. But I know in my brain that I'm not a natural public speaker. I know that in high school and college, I was sitting at the back of the room and never saying a word in class. Like, this isn't a natural ability. I know that the reason that went well is because of my process. Because I had been practicing for months and giving that workshop for months and experimenting with it and thinking about it. So I know, look, she thought it went well, but I know that it went well because of my process. So even though she gave me really, really bad feedback, I can take that and change it in my head and be like, okay, somebody thought it went well. Why did it go well? What can I double down on next time? Or what can I even do better next time? And so when students start to understand this, they can start to do that with the bad feedback that they hear. So when they hear a teacher tell them, like, look, maybe you're just not cut out for the speech or debate team. Maybe you're not a math person. They know they can hear that and go, okay, what they're saying is I'm not the best yet, but I know that I can do it. I have a brain and I can do it. And so, again, that's easier to say and hard to do, but it can be done. And so what we start to do is develop this helmet of, hey, I have a growth mindset. And even when I get this bad feedback, and like you and I discovered, most of the feedback is the bad kind, right? So we can start to we can block it out, or we can take it, we change it in our head, we use it. And so we found that that's helping lots of students. When you talk to them about that, like, hey, when you hear the bad feedback, if someone is telling you you can't do something or you are something, change it in your head. If somebody's punishing you for making mistakes, understand, look, those are okay. It's okay. And again, that's a tough thing to do. It's very tough, but it can be done.
To finish off, if you can think of, say, 3 to 5 mega hot, important things that you think if a teacher is walking into their class on Monday, what can they really focus on? If you most important things, three or so most important things that you think they could do with their new.
I'm going to go 4 steps. Okay. Help students believe in their ability to learn. And then obviously there's probably like 8 bullet points under that, but that's where those brain conversations come in. So help students believe in their ability to learn and grow. 2, understand how learning works and help students understand that. And that is where your brain is like a muscle comes in, or the jungle tiger comes in. So understanding that learning takes mistakes, okay? 3, getting better is more important than looking good. And that's what we're talking about in this classroom. Okay, so like that simple, and that's even a question you can ask the student. Are you here to look good or are you here to get better? Because those are 2 very different things. 4, encourage students to seek out the ugly. What that means is this. Like, if you understand how learning does work and you understand that your brain learns when it's challenged and when it's stretched, go find situations that do that. Like, go jump into that stuff. Find things that stretch you and scare you and jump into it. So recap. You have to believe in your ability to learn and grow. That's like the essence of a growth mindset. Understand how learning works that learning is ugly and your brain learns when it's challenged. Understand that learning and getting better is more important than looking good, and then go seek out those challenges and seek out those situations that will stretch you. And so, like, again, those are 4 very broad things, but like that's the steps that I think matter the most. And then under those steps comes the stories, the metaphors, the grid, all of that stuff fits into that framework, I think. So, yeah.
Fantastic. So if people were trying to have a look at you've put a lot of resources together, lots, and they're great. If you want people in Australia to have a look at that stuff, where can they look? Where can they find it?
They go to trainugly.com, and everything is up there. Everything is free, and it's always updating. So it's not just a static site. Like, literally on a weekly basis, there's a new video, a new article, a new application, a new conversation, a new blab. We post a lot of these blabs. And so what I tell people is, I don't have all this figured out, and no one does. But I am thinking about this every waking moment of my life. And so because I think about it so much, and because I care about it so much, it's literally changed my life. There is always new things that we're posting and helping people understand it better and helping people to teach it better. And with the site, we focus most on, like, here's the principles, but this is how you help them stick, and this is how you teach them. And so if anyone's interested in any of that, you can go to trainugly, trainugly.com. My personal phone number's up there, my personal email's on there, and like, I love conversations like this. So I would encourage anyone to reach out if they have questions. I love talking about it, as you can tell.
I could talk about it all day. Well, that's excellent. Well, thank you so much. That's been fantastic, and I think this is going to be great for Australian teachers starting school on Monday. I think it's going to be brilliant, and hopefully they will reach out to you.